Hello again and welcome to my channel. If you're new here, thank you so much for clicking on this video. And if you're not, welcome back. Please remember to leave a like and subscribe if you have not done so already, because it's a free way that you can help me out. It was New Year's Eve of 1997 in Grovetown, New Zealand. Olivia Hope was 17 years old and she had recently finished her final year at Marlborough Girls' College and was getting ready to start university. She was a high-achieving and academically talented student and a gifted pianist who practiced daily and had just passed the Trinity College of London performance exam. She had recently celebrated Christmas with her very close-knit family, where she and her sister Amelia had exchanged rings engraved with loving messages to each other. She was about to start her legal degree at the University of Otago, and she wanted to let loose. It was the first year that their parents allowed them to rent a yacht and set out for New Year's on their own. So they did just that and rented a small yacht called the Tamarack with 7 other friends and set sail for the Marlborough Sounds, an extensive network of sea-drowned valleys at the northern end of the South Island of New Zealand. And in the 90s, on New Year's Eve in the Sounds, the best place to go to for an epic party was Furneaux Lodge, a centuries-old lodge, and the only way to access it was by boat. Guy Wallace was working at the bar at Furneaux on 31 December 1997, and throughout the day, the staff at the lodge were busily preparing for what would be one of the busiest nights of the year. They watched as the Endeavour Inlet became fuller and fuller with hundreds of boats moored and anchored, filled with partygoers. Olivia and her friends dropped anchor early in the day. They spent some time on the yacht and swimming in the bay, and as the sun set, water taxis and dinghies started transporting people from their stationary boats to the jetty. As the festivities at Furneaux Lodge started, the friends from the Tamarack joined in. It was said that there were around 1,500 to 2,000 people at the lodge taking part in the festivities that night. One of them was 21-year-old Ben Smart, an engineering assistant from Blenheim, a town close to Grovetown where Olivia was from. He was also attending with a group of his friends. Ben was a laid-back guy. He loved music and was part of a band called Exit. He was known to not go to any party without taking his guitar with him. Ben was streetwise and had spent time in Saudi Arabia and the Maldives Islands where his military father was posted. He had also lived away from home for several years whilst at boarding school and at Polytech. He was a great sportsman and loved a good prank. He was really well liked by the girls as well. The plan for the group of friends was to celebrate New Year's Eve at Furneaux and then sleep over at a batch at Punga Cove or a beach shack with some other friends. Olivia and Ben had actually met each other just the year before on 31 December 1996, when Olivia had been 16 and Ben would be going into his final year at Christchurch Polytech, at this exact same place, Furneaux Lodge. They both shared a love of music, and it all just seemed to click between the two. They lost contact, but they met up again after the Food and Wine Festival in February of 1997, and her father stated that it was a typical scenario of a younger girl being attracted to someone older. That summer, they often went into Blenheim together, alone or in a group, to shop or catch a movie. And they visited with friends or spent time at each other's houses. The relationship continued until Ben had to return to Polytech at the end of summer, but they had remained friendly. The two of them might have arrived separately, but as fate would have it, among the sea of people, they ended up finding each other. Earlier that night, Olivia had actually kissed someone else, but they had parted ways to catch up with friends. Ben had been fresh from a breakup and had also been seen kissing someone else. And as the party wore down and the drinks flowed, Olivia and Ben just gravitated towards each other. By the time that midnight rolled around and Olivia and Ben were still together, they brought in the new year with each other, and they were seen on the jetty with their arms around each other just after midnight. At around 1:30 a.m., they were also seen sharing a kiss. And when they were ready to leave, they decided that they would find a place to spend the night together. So, they left a party in a small motorized boat with a group of friends who would drop them off at the yacht she was renting with her sister and friends to pick up some things before they left to their final destination for the night. But the people that were supposed to come back and get them from the Tamarack never did so. Coupled with that, Olivia was quite upset upon their arrival because there were so many freeloaders on the boat that there was no place left for her and Ben to sleep. So she started waking people up to tell them that they needed to leave, since she had actually paid for her spot on the boat. But people responded saying that Ben, in fact, did not pay to be on the boat, so why should they give up a spot for him? And angry words were exchanged. It was just after 3 when bartender Guy Wallace was ready to leave. There were still about a handful of people at the bar, but he was one of the only sober ones still around. A young couple that was still hanging around asked whether they could get a lift with him in his dinghy, as they had no way to return to their boats. He agreed, and as he got down to the dock, there were 2 more that asked whether they could join. He ended up with 4 young people: Hayden Morrissey, Sarah Dyer, Olivia's sister Amelia, and her friend Rick Goddard. And just as they were about to leave, a man in his late 20s that he remembered serving at the bar that night asked whether he could also get a lift, and Guy agreed. So they set off to drop everyone at their boats. Their first stop would be the Tamarack, which was the closest. As they got closer to the boat, Amelia could see that her sister was upset. She explained to her sister that she and Ben were ready to just get off of the boat. Upset with her confrontations and not having any space to sleep, they were desperate to get off and find a place to rest for the night. Amelia and Rick didn't mind the overcrowding, so they decided to get on the Tamarack, and as they got on, Olivia asked Guy to take them back to the shore. Guy agreed, so Olivia and Ben got onto the dinghy and drove away with Guy. Guy wanted to know whether he should drop them off at any place specific, and they asked whether he knew of any place that they could stay for the night. But Guy told them that they were out of luck finding a place to stay, since everything was booked up due to it being New Year's Eve. The unidentified man on the dinghy offered the pair a place to sleep on what he said was his yacht. He then stated that he changed his mind at that only Olivia could come, not Ben. Rather strange, but everyone brushed it off, thinking that he was just trying to make a joke. Olivia and Ben decided to take him up on his offer with no other place to stay. He then guided them to his yacht, which ended up being quite impressive. It was described as a 38 to 40 foot or 12 meter long double-masted wooden ketch. It was an old-style yacht that was white with a blue stripe on the hull and brass portholes embedded into the blue stripe. It was also adorned with decorative ropework. Guy Wallace was unsure of whether he should leave them there, and as they started getting up, to get onto the boat, he asked them whether they were sure they wanted to stay. They told him that they were sure and bid them all a Happy New Year as they and the unidentified man climbed up off the dinghy onto the ketch. Guy then left to drop the other 2 passengers at their batch, with the ketch at his back, not knowing that this would be the last time that Olivia Hope and Ben Smart would ever be seen. Later that day, hungover and partied out, Olivia's sister Amelia and her other friends woke up on the Tamarack, and it took them a bit of time to notice that Olivia had not come back to the boat. They weren't all that worried because they knew that she had been with Ben, and thought that they had just gone to stay somewhere with Ben's friends. As the day went by, the boat slowly started departing from the inlet, and by night time the inlet was quiet and deserted. Amelia wasn't sure what to do. There wasn't any way that she could get hold of her sister, but she knew that they had only rented the boat for a certain amount of time, and they had to return it. So they made the decision to leave without Olivia, hoping that her sister would return home soon with Ben in tow. But sadly, that didn't happen. And as the 2nd of January rolled around, Olivia and Ben had still not shown up anywhere. Friends and family were worried. This was very unlike them, and their parents decided to report them as missing to the police. The police took down the report and the family's concerns, but were convinced that the 2 would show up within a day or 2. An official search, however, started on the 3rd of January. Guy Wallace, who was the witness that they were most interested in, was interviewed and drew a picture of the ketch that was shared with the Navy and Coast Guard and asked to keep an eye out for it. Satellite photos of the area were studied to see whether there were any signs of the yacht, and they also notified all ports in the South Pacific, but it was stated that no one reported a sighting of a yacht with that description. On that same day, police also sent out a plea to those that attended the party at Furneaux Lodge, asking them for any photos of the party that night, hoping that they would see Ben and Olivia in interactions with someone that they could get information from. They also asked for photos of the bay in hope of seeing any photos of the ketch. And soon, photos of the night started streaming in. In the photos supplied, they saw Ben and Olivia in some, but they did not see them having any contact with any unidentified people at the party, only with people that they knew. So, it seemed that they only met the unidentified man at the Tamarack that night. According to the police, they could also not find any photos of the ketch, not even a single one. But they had many eyewitness statements of people that confirmed that the ketch had definitely been there that night, and they had described it in detail. Police divers were also brought in to search the inlet, but found no bodies, which left the Hope and Smart families with some hope that their children might still be found alive. Rumors soon started doing the rounds that Olivia and Ben had eloped and were in hiding because they were not ready to face their families. But Olivia's father put these rumors to rest and said that they were both about to start new chapters in their lives. Olivia at university and Ben at his father's engineering firm. It would be very unlikely for them to just up and disappear without letting anyone know. Even if they were not wanting to get in contact with their parents, they would get into contact with one of their siblings or friends to let them know that they were safe. On the 5th of January, well-known New Zealand detective Inspector Rob Pope was put in charge of the investigation that they called Operation Tam, short for Tamarack, and he was joined by a group of policemen from across the country. From the start of the investigation, there were many rumors doing the rounds, and the police were under severe scrutiny, with people saying that they were saying and doing nothing to dispel these rumors, and holding any and all information that they had very close to the chest. The police's focus started with Guy Wallace, the bartender from Furneaux and the driver of the water taxi that took Olivia and Ben from the Tamarack to the unidentified man's yacht, and the other passengers on the dinghy. But Guy was the only sober one and was considered as the most reliable eyewitness. In his police statements on the 3rd and 5th of January, he described the yacht to them. He described it as a 38 to 40 foot ketch and as well maintained, built of timber with a thick blue stripe on the hull and several round portholes with brass surrounds set within the blue stripe. He also said it was rafted in a group of between 3 and 5 other vessels on the night. He also drew them a picture of what the ketch looked like and wrote on the picture ketch and underlined it twice. He also described the unknown man that Olivia and Ben got onto the ketch with as around 5'9" to 5'10", or about 1.78 to 1.8 meters tall, with about 2 to 3 days worth of facial hair growth on his face, possible arm tattoos, and a wiry build. He said that he had about medium-length, wavy, unkempt, windswept hair, but definitely not short hair. He described the man as very scruffy in appearance, noting that it didn't look like he had spent any time cleaning himself up for the night out. He stated that he was dressed in blue jeans and a Levi's short-sleeve button-up shirt with a red tack on the shirt left breast pocket. Wallace maintained that the man on his taxi was the same man he and other staff had served in the lounge bar earlier in the evening. A composite sketch of the unidentified man was also drawn up, and the sketch of him and the ketch were distributed to the public in hopes that someone might either notice him or notice the ketch. Guy Wallace later stated that the composite sketch didn't quite match the man he saw, and when he wanted to make changes, he was told that they were in a rush and that he needed to sign it off, which he did, so the composite sketch was not an accurate match to the unknown man. A week into the investigation, with the composite sketches released, no one was able to identify the mystery man or the ketch. Many had witnessed him being at the party, but no one from the party personally knew him. The same with the ketch. On the night of, there were several people that confirmed the sighting of the ketch, and in the following weeks there were a number of sightings of a 2-masted ketch in the Marlborough Sounds area reported to the police, including one account from a former police officer with 40 years experience. A number of witnesses came forward with sightings of said ketch, even a few that stated seeing a woman matching Olivia's description on the ketch. But they were either told their information was not wanted, their statements were not followed up, or they were told that they were mistaken. One couple specifically that claimed to have seen a blonde woman on a ketch with the same description reported it, and they were told to be mistaken, as Olivia had in fact had red hair and not blonde hair. But Olivia's hair had never been red.
For several weeks, police issued this sketch of a 2-masted ketch. They wanted to hear from anyone who had seen it, but in the end, police discounted any sightings and eventually said there was no ketch linked to their investigation. Witnesses Ted and Yvonne Welsh say they too saw Olivia Hope and Ben Smart.
Never since have I had any doubt that Olivia was alive and well on the 2nd of January when I saw her go past.
I remember it distinctly by 2 big masks, distinctive looking boat, came in very late, 10:30, I suppose. It's darkish. I don't know what time it went. It could have been early hours in the morning, but it was definitely there.
Did you ever see it on another occasion?
On the 2nd.
2nd of January?
Yes, it went past us when we were out fishing on our boat. Within 50 metres of it. It was quite a big swell and it was going up and down.
You sure it's the same one?
I'm absolutely positive. I made the comment of it looked like a Chinese junk going past. Everybody laughed, yeah.
How can you be so convinced it was Ben and Olivia on that boat?
Well, even after all this time, you live it every week probably. Something comes into your mind, somebody brings something up, and I knew it then. I knew it when I saw the picture of Olivia dressed the way she was dressed and her hair colour, the hair colour that it was on New Year's Eve. It was instant. That was the girl on the boat.
No doubt about that at all?
No doubt about it. None at all. That was definitely Olivia Hope sitting on the back of that boat on the 2nd of January.
So basically the police have told you you didn't see Olivia, you didn't see Ben, and you definitely didn't see a ketch.
That was pretty much the Crown prosecutor summing up in court and on national TV, yes.
Olivia's sister Amelia was also questioned, but stated that she did not have a clear recollection of the man on the water taxi that night, but was sure that if she had seen him again, she would be able to recognize him. But what no one knew was that police already had a possible suspect in mind. Enter 26-year-old Scott Watson from Picton. Scott came from a boating family, and in fact built his own boat that he lived on. It was a small 26-foot sloop yacht, had a steel hull, and it was sort of like a rusty red and white, was low set and had only one mast, and he named it Blade. As Scott sailed into Endeavour Inlet on the 31st of December 1997, it was already so full that there was no place really for him to moor, and he ended up tying his boat to two other bigger yachts, the Mina Cornelia and the Bianco. Scott was there for a good time and was ready to party. He started off the day partying on the Mina Cornelia, and around 9 p.m. the group took a water taxi from the yacht to shore. By this time, Scott was already drunk, but that didn't stop him from drinking more once he got to Furneaux. He tried very hard to turn on the charm with women, but ended up making more of a nuisance of himself and coming off like a complete asshole. At one point, he was talking to a group of people and knocked over a girl's drink, and as she went to pick up the glass, he bent down and grabbed her by the breast. As she told him off, he just turned around and laughed it off and told her she was way too serious and walked away. He also picked fights with random strangers and tried his luck with just about every woman he could, again with the inappropriate language and behavior, carrying on being his oblivious, drunk, annoying self for the rest of the night. He returned to his boat early on New Year's morning, but being so drunk, he couldn't remember what time it was. But he didn't want the party to end there and ended up waking the occupants of the Mina Cornelia, asking them to continue partying with him, but they told him to get lost. He then tried his luck at the Bianco and saw the couple on board sleeping, also waking them up. They again told him to get lost, so he decided to go to bed. He woke up and he got ready and left the inlet around what he says was 6 a.m. and set off to Erie Bay, where he would meet up with a friend. As interviews and eyewitness accounts into the investigation of Olivia and Ben's disappearance continued, the police started narrowing in on Scott. According to police, he was similar in appearance to the mystery man, as described by eyewitnesses, and he was also confirmed to have acted inappropriately towards women the same way that the mystery man had been described as doing that night. Scott was known to smoke weed and drink and get drunk often, making a scene and a fool of himself. And the way he behaved at the party just made the police feel even more so that it could be Scott. The lead investigator also stated the more they looked at the case and a possible suspect, the more Scott Watson, and I quote, stood out like a dog's balls, and said that Scott seemed to have the right sort of agenda and pedigree, and that he had a gut feeling about him. The pedigree he was talking about was the fact that Scott Watson had 48 criminal convictions at the time, mainly from when he was a teenager for burglary, theft, cannabis offences, 2 counts of possessing an offensive weapon, and 1 for assault when he was 16. Watson had been imprisoned for 2 short periods in 1989 and 1990, but had seemingly cleaned up his act in his 20s. Guy Wallace, the key eyewitness, was subsequently shown 2 photographs of Scott Watson in a montage when he was interviewed by the police again on 9 January 1998, but he said he did not recognize anyone in the photographs as being the mystery man of that night. Amelia was also shown the same montage and did not recognize anyone as being the man of that night. The occupants of the boats that the blade were tied to on New Year's Eve also indicated that Scott arrived alone when he woke them up looking for a party. Scott's boat was rather small, and the berth of the blade was just big enough for 1 or maybe 2 people to be below deck at the same time. So, if he did in fact arrive with both Olivia and Ben, it would have been difficult for all 3 of them to fit below deck comfortably. Rumors about the Watson family soon began to swirl in the small town of Picton, as well as in the media, stating that they were a family of criminals and that Scott was without a doubt a guilty man. Rumors even spread that Scott was having an incestuous relationship with his sister Sandy. Watson accused police of influencing media coverage of the case, suggesting that they leaked these rumors to reporters and wanted people to have a certain idea of him to make him seem more like the right type of person that could be said suspect. Some of this was confirmed by members of the community, and even Gerald Hope, Olivia's father, asserted that the police deliberately leaked details of Watson's criminal history. The police also went as far as to bug the Watson family's home phones and recorded all their conversations, hoping to find them saying something to incriminate Scott, but they had no such luck. Instead, all they heard were derogatory things being said about Detective Pope and the police. Police seized Watson's sloop Blade on 12 January 1998, to the surprise of many following the case, because when compared to the descriptions of the mystery ketch, Blade was very small, had a steel, not timber hull, had no portholes, and had only 1 mast. It was stated by some members of the community that the only thing that the sloop and a ketch had in common was that they both floated. Everyone that was on the water taxi with Olivia and Ben stated that they saw them climbing up from the taxi onto the ketch, which would have not been the case with the sloop, as it's a lower set boat that is set deeper into the water, and it would have been about the same level as the Naiad dinghy that they were delivered on. So if they were climbing onto the Blade, they would have just moved across at about the same height and not climbed upward onto the boat like they would have done with a ketch. After the Blade was seized, it was airlifted to an Air Force base for forensic analysis. Information leaked to the media stating that when the Blade was seized, the anchors had been missing, and soon the theory formed that the bodies of Olivia and Ben were tied to the anchors and dropped into the ocean somewhere. But it was just another rumor. When Blade was seized, there were in fact 3 different anchors found on board. On the same day that Blade was seized, they also issued a search warrant for the homes of Scott's parents and sister, which they searched, but no evidence relating to the case was found. So, of course, to make a solid case against Scott, they would need evidence from the boat. When collecting forensic evidence, the officer stated that it had become extremely obvious during a fingerprint examination that every hard surface inside the boat had been completely wiped down, with him stating, "It would appear as that someone had gone to considerable trouble in totally wiping down every hard surface on the vessel. It would also appear as though such items as the VHF radio and depth sounder has been removed from their brackets and also wiped down. Every item on the vessel, including plastic containers, pots, plates, etc., have been fingerprinted, and not only is there clear evidence of this in contrast to the general untidiness of the boat, but the almost total absence of fingerprints is very unusual." Scott indicated that the last thorough cleaning that he had done on the sloop was in mid-December 1997 due to a rough voyage during a storm where water entered the cabin and everything was left wet, which is when he went as far as even cleaning the inside of cassette covers. This overcleaning is exactly what made him look guilty to police, but many boaties came to his defense, saying that it was common practice to clean the inside of cassette covers and tapes because salt water could cause damage. A neighbor also came to Scott's defense, saying that during December 1997, she saw carpet pieces from his boat being cleaned and hung out to dry in his sister's yard. Evidence from a dry cleaner was also presented, who was brought bedding to clean by Scott at around the same time. During the fingerprinting, even though they stated that there was a lack of prints, they did find Scott and only Scott's prints in the boat. During this search, they also recovered a tiger print blanket from his boat, and from it they recovered many short brown hairs. Of 400 hairs found on it, only 11 hairs had roots, but none of them had strong enough DNA to be linked to either Scott or Ben, and none of the initial hairs found were blonde and long like Olivia's hair. The investigators found certain areas on the bottom of the hull of the Blade where hull weed had been wiped away, so they theorized that Scott must have killed Olivia and Ben, weighed down their bodies and threw them overboard, which in turn led to the bodies wiping away the hull weed in certain spots. Watson's explanation was that he had swam around the boat at one point when he was moored to scrub away and remove weed from the hull and propeller to reduce drag, but that it was a tedious job having to swim around and hang onto the boat in the water the whole time. So he did only what was necessary, which is why it wasn't removed from the whole hull. It also happens that Scott changed the color of his boat on 1 January 1998 from its original color of a rusty red and white as seen on 31 December 1997 to blue and white, and police wondered why, and wondered if he was trying to hide scratch marks or damage to the boat. Scott's explanation was that he had been offered paint for his boat from a friend who was a caretaker on a property in Erie Bay, a while before actually making the change, but had only taken him up on his offer on 1 January because it was the only time that he had for the boat to dry for a while before him and his sister went out on a new trip together the next week. But the police theorized that he used the trip to his friend's property to get rid of Ben and Olivia's bodies and changed the color to make his boat less recognizable. But changing it from red to blue would just make it look more like the cage described by Guy Wallace, so I'm not sure why the color change would factor in, unless he would be hiding some scratches, etc. Scott stated that he arrived at his friend's place between 10 and 12 in the morning and spent most of the day with the friend and his children, which wouldn't have given him a lot of time to get rid of the bodies. The timing was confirmed by said friend and his kids, but the friend's testimony changed after police found cannabis growing on his property, and he was threatened with jail time. The friend then changed Scott's times of arrival to closer to 5 p.m., which of course aligned with the police's theory of Scott disposing of the bodies on the way to Erie Bay in Cook Strait, as they had a witness putting Scott in that area on that day around 4:30 p.m. And even though he changed his testimony, charges were still pressed against him, and he still ended up serving time for growing the cannabis, with police making him believe that Scott was in fact the one that gave him up. 3 months into the investigation, samples of Olivia's hair was sent to the forensics lab, and on the same day, Scott's tiger blanket was re-examined to see whether new evidence could be found. This was done in the exact same lab. This time, they found 2 blonde, long hairs on the blanket that they hadn't found the first time around. Was it just a strange coincidence that the hairs were not found on the blanket before, but found present on the blanket the same day samples of Olivia's hair arrived at the lab? The long blonde hairs would have been very hard to miss during the first examination, right? Well, this evidence lost all credibility once it was found that the bag containing Olivia's hair had a hole at the bottom where the 2 hairs could have easily fallen out and cross-contaminated the blanket. To even further kill the credibility, the police that collected the hair from Olivia's house also neglected to count the number of hair strands that they collected, so it was impossible to say whether 2 strands had gone missing from the bag or not. So, they needed more solid evidence or witness testimony. So in April, police then drew up another montage of suspects where they changed the photo of Scott Watson to one in which he had his eyes half closed. In each previous photo Guy Wallace had been shown of Scott, he said his eyes were different to that of the mystery man. And in this photo, they changed the way his eyes looked. This photo became known as the blink photo. On 20 April 1998, Wallace was shown this new montage, containing the blink photo. After seeing this new photo, and not realizing this new photo was of Scott Watson, a man he previously indicated was definitely not the mystery man, Wallace now said that Scott might be the mystery man on the boat, but said that while the eyes were the same as the man he had seen on that night, the hair of the man in photograph 3, Scott Watson, was too short and his appearance was generally too tidy. Again, the mystery man was described with longish hair and with 2 or 3 days' worth of beard growth and generally unkempt or untidy. This photo here of Scott was taken on board the Mina Cornelia before they went on shore to Furneaux on New Year's Eve of 1997. He doesn't seem to be unshaven and seems to have quite short hair, which means that his appearance did not change on the night of the disappearance of Olivia and Ben. He does, however, look to be wearing a blue button-up shirt. However, some people that night did describe him as with hair that was feathered around his ears and that touched his collar, and said that he had a few days stubble on his chin. Again, not quite a match to the way the mystery man was described. Amelia was also shown the same photo lineup, but she said that none of the 8 men whose photo she was shown looked like the mystery man, and the only one of them sort of resembled the man due to the receding hairline, and that man was not Scott Watson. Rosalind McNeely, who was the bar manager at Furneaux Lodge on New Year's Eve, was also shown the montage with the blink photo and said that Scott Watson most resembled the mystery man, but stated that she was not 100% sure that he was in fact the mystery man because she remembered the man with longer hair and the beginnings of a beard. She also remembered the mystery man's drink order was strictly bourbon and coke. Everyone that knew Scott stated that his drink of choice was either rum and coke or beer. The police believed that there had been enough evidence to prosecute Scott, and he was subsequently arrested on 15 June 1998 and charged with the murders of Ben Smart and Olivia Hope. Scott's trial started on 10 June 1999. The trial lasted for 11 weeks and attracted considerable media attention. Scott entered pleas of not guilty to both counts of murder. The prosecution, or Crown as they are known in New Zealand, had to build a case with no bodies and no murder weapons, and they knew that it would be a tough case with only circumstantial evidence. And their main goal would be to play on the emotions of the jury. During the trial, they called 488 witnesses. The main plank of the Crown's case was that Watson invited Smart and Hope to sleep on his yacht in the early hours of 1 January 1998, and that this was the last time they were ever seen. During the trial, one of the other water taxi drivers that was on duty that night, Don Anderson, testified that he dropped Scott at the Blade sometime between 2 and 3 a.m., but he wasn't quite clear on the exact time, stating, "The boat that I took this person to is the one identified as Blade in the police photograph dated 31/12/97. The person I took to Blade would have been medium to slight build. He was wearing a denim shirt, a lighter color than his jeans, I think. He was wearing blue denim jeans. The shirt was long-sleeved and had a collar. I can vaguely recall that he was wearing a t-shirt underneath the shirt. The clothes looked clean, but the guy looked scruffy. He looked like he had about 3 or 4 days of growth on his face, and unkempt, curly-ish dark hair. It looked like he needed a haircut." Some of the occupants of the neighboring boats, Mina Cornelia and Bianco, testified that they were woken up by Watson in the early hours of the morning, but couldn't say exactly what time it was, but stated that it was definitely after 2, because they were still on deck partying at that time, and only stopped partying and went to bed between 2:30 and 3 a.m. So both the Crown and the defense conceded that this trip did in fact take place, but the Crown later came back and argued that Watson returned to shore after he was dropped off at the Blade, but could not say how because there was no record of another water taxi picking him up from his boat. This became known as the two-trip theory. They stated that it did not matter that they could not prove how he got back to the shore, but that he must have done so because a witness testified to being in an altercation with Scott after 2:30 a.m., as it was after the band had already packed up, and they had done so at 2:30 a.m. Scott had thrown a derogatory slur to a young man wearing a feminine pearl necklace that had been given to him by his sister that had cancer. This young man had quickly put Scott into his place and told Scott about his sister, to which Scott mumbled an apology and refocused his attention to the women in the group. This was confirmed to be closer to 3 a.m. by several witnesses of the scrap. The timeline of this altercation and its aftermath put Scott Watson on the Furneaux wharf just after around probably 3:30 a.m., looking for a ride back to Blade. That is the crucial time window that Scott Watson had to have made a water taxi ride to Blade, during the same 30-minute window that the mystery man was also getting a ride. It was also presented that there might have been a confusion between the Alliance ketch and the mystery ketch. Alliance was a 52-foot ketch rigged scow, similar to a river barge with 2 masts. It featured ornate rope rigging on its masts, like Captain Cook's Endeavour, and a blue stripe along the length of its hull containing portholes, also overpainted by the same blue. At the back, it had a distinctive square wheelhouse cabin, making it resemble a Chinese junk. In other words, it was a highly noticeable boat, and it was on its maiden voyage in the Sounds after a decade-long refurbishment in the Northern Islands. If Yvonne Walsh, who was one of the first people to testify, to say that we saw a Chinese junk that looked like a barge with painted blue portholes and ornate rope rigging and a wheelhouse cabin on the back, but we know the Alliance and it wasn't the Alliance is right, and the mystery ketch was not the Alliance, then there must have been 2 ketch-rigged barge scows of the same tiny area of New Zealand at exactly the same time, both with white hulls and a blue stripe. We know this because Alliance was definitely there at Resolution Bay, but Walsh insists that she saw another one and she did not see the Alliance. Wallace was also asked, "What can you say about this boat that you dropped these 3 people to? First of all, have you mentioned the boat being with others? How many others was it with?" He answered, "Anywhere from 3 to 5, including itself." So they asked, "So 3 to 5 boats tied up together, rafted up?" He answered, "Yes." He was asked, "How big was the boat? What type of boat was it that you dropped these 3 people off to?" He answered, "It appeared to me to be a ketch, 38 to 40 foot, very well maintained vessel." The prosecution noted that big ketches are generally not rafted to other boats, because their size makes lashing them together impractical and dangerous if the weather changes. That means if they were dropped at a rafted boat, it had to be a smaller boat in a group of similar sized craft, and rafting is done in a top and sail sequence side by side. The only raft in the location Wallace described was the one with blade. If it was a raft, it cannot have been a ketch. Sarah Dyer, that was on the boat with Guy Wallace, and Hayden Morrissey with Olivia and Ben and the mystery man that night, identified that Hayden did definitely not reach up towards the boat that they took Olivia and Ben and the mystery man to. She said that he was still sitting down, he just reached over to a part of the boat, and she said that she could not remember the boat having any portholes. Prosecution also revealed that they had found scratch marks on rubber material on the inside of the front hatch of blade. They stated that these must have been made by Olivia while she had been kept captive before being killed, while she had scratched at the hatch trying to open it. However, the scratch marks were all over the hatch, and if it had been closed as the prosecution had stated, there would have been a frame of area with no scratches, as Olivia would not have been able to scratch up the whole hatch if it had been closed. Scott explained that the scratches on the hatch was made by a stick when his nieces were playing on the boat while the hatch was open. This was corroborated by a witness that stated remembering the girls getting into trouble when his sister Sandy helped him clean his boat and they scratched the hatch. It was also presented that the hatch could only lock from the inside, so if Olivia was locked inside the boat, she would be able to unlock it, open it, and climb out through it. And also, the back end of the cabin had no door to lock her inside. But the prosecution replied that it would have not been possible to open the hatch if a heavy object had been placed on top of it. Prosecution claimed that the blade left its mooring at Endeavour Inlet probably before 6 a.m. on New Year's Day, with Ben and Olivia's bodies on board, that Watson then dumped them into Cook Strait and went to his friend's place in Erie Bay and lied about the time that he arrived there. And with the friend's testimony of arrival time being changed, the defense couldn't argue the new time of arrival. However, Scott stuck to his time of arrival, being between 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. in the afternoon. A crucial aspect of the prosecution case came from two prisoners whose names were suppressed and were only referred to as Witness A and B. They both claimed that they met Watson in prison when he was on remand and said that he told them that he was responsible for Ben and Olivia's disappearance. Prisoner Witness B said that he and Watson interacted on numerous occasions and became good friends in Addington Prison, which is when Scott confessed to him. The other crucial aspect it relied on was the identification of Watson by Guy Wallace and Ross McNeely as the so-called mystery man. No fingerprints or blood DNA of the victims were found on Watson's boat. The only physical evidence produced at the trial related to the hair found on the tiger blanket, which of course was disputed. The cleaning evidence of total cleaning was also disputed when the police sergeant stated in court that the number of fingerprints found were neither more nor less than he would expect to find in a similar area of a house like the kitchen or bathroom. He also stated that the signs of cleaning, the wipe marks highlighted by the fingerprint powder, covered only 30 to 50% of the areas and not all hard surfaces as initially stated. After 11 weeks of hearing testimony, the jury retired to deliberate and make their decision. And on 11 September of 1999, Watson was convicted of the murders. And on 26 November 1999, he was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum non-parole period of 17 years. When Watson was given a chance to speak, he told the jury, "You are wrong." And since then, he has continued to insist that he is innocent. In the years following the trial, Olivia Hope's father, Gerald Hope, expressed concerns over how the investigation was handled, as well as the evidence that was presented at trial, telling journalist Mike White that he felt very uncomfortable about the way that the Crown ran the case. He stated that Olivia's sister Amelia was called to testify at the trial about friendship rings that she and Olivia had exchanged, and that the prosecutor continued questioning her about said mystery man, and what she could remember until she broke down in tears. He stated that it was pure theatre and that the whole thing must have had a huge emotional effect on the jurors. He stated that during the trial a lot of things were talked about that had no bearing on the case whatsoever, and that the police had taken every opportunity to tell them how bad Scott Watson was. He stated that it even seemed at one point that they were trying to get Amelia to agree that Scott Watson was in fact definitely the suspect, even though she on numerous occasions stated that he did not match her memory of the mystery man she saw that night. Now, Gerald has never personally said that he did not believe that Scott was not to blame, but that he was not happy with how everything was handled, and he has expressed doubts. After the trial, Guy Wallace was adamant about being misled by the police over the blink photo of Scott, and has since the trial said he believed that Scott was innocent, and felt that he had inadvertently contributed to the incarceration of an innocent man. Wallace said that he felt tremendous pressure from police and the media during the investigation. When he was interrogated by the detectives from Christchurch CIB, they had initially suggested that he was somehow responsible for the disappearance of the teenagers, and as a result of accusations against him by the police, some locals began treating him with suspicion. People he knew began to think that he was guilty and shunned him. He said that in the initial stages of the investigation, the police were desperate to arrest someone, and it could easily have been him, stating, "I knew in my heart of hearts, if it wasn't him in there, I'd be doing time. It's just that simple." Guy later presented an affidavit claiming that the police had misled him and pressured him into identifying Scott as the mystery man. He maintained this position in multiple interviews since, and up to the day that he took his own life in March of 2021. Roz McNeely, who also identified Watson from the Blink photo in montage 2, stated that once she saw a picture of Scott taken that night, showing him to be clean-shaven, she also recanted and signed an affidavit stating that she had made a mistake identifying Scott Watson as the mystery man. Despite his damning testimony during the trial, prisoner witness A subsequently admitted to a number of lawyers and the New Zealand Herald that he lied in court. He stated that at the time he was receiving death threats from a gang member and was coming up for parole. Police visited him at least 10 times over a 12-month period leading up to the trial and pressured him into making false accusations in his testimony. Witness A said he chose to help the police in the hope that they would be able to save him. It was also found out that prisoner witness B was never in the same cell as Watson and had little opportunity to develop any close relationship with Watson, such that a confession might be made. It was later revealed that on his release from prison, this witness was granted the use of a car and cell phone for his testimony by the police. After his conviction, more stories on Scott's character also appeared. Stories about how he confessed to friends that he wanted to rape women and make movies about it, and how in the months leading up to the disappearance of Olivia and Ben, he had mused to his friends that he had wondered what it would feel like to kill someone. But Scott stated that he could definitely not remember ever saying that he wanted to kill someone. And when he was questioned about his inappropriate behavior towards women, not only in that night but in general, he stated that he was definitely not the only drunk guy making comments to women that night about their tits and asses. Scott appealed his conviction in the Court of Appeals in April and May of 2000. 3 appeal court judges heard submissions from both the defense and the prosecution, but decided that there was no new evidence to recommend a second trial. They also disregarded the defense's submission that the prosecution's two-trip theory had appeared out of the blue late in the trial, stating, "To prohibit the Crown from promoting a rational theory, for which there was supporting evidence, consistent with the whole nature and thrust of its case, would be a drastic step, and one to be taken only where the interest of justice would otherwise be in jeopardy. Therefore, the appeal was denied." In 2010, journalist Keith Hunter and Scott's father, Chris Watson, made a complaint to the Independent Police Conduct Authority about police conduct in his case. The complaint alleged that the head of the inquiry, Inspector Rob Pope, ignored relevant evidence, spread rumors about Scott Watson and his family, swore false affidavits to obtain search warrants, and that the police bought or pressured 2 prisoners into telling lies in court, and that they deliberately or accidentally contaminated the hair samples found on Watson's boat. The report was highly critical of aspects of the investigation led by Rob Pope. It stated that the photograph montages used by the police breached so many rules it exposed the integrity of the investigation to justifiable criticism and to the drawing of inferences about intention and motivation. It also stated that the police failed to pursue leads to find the mystery catch seen by so many witnesses, including some witnesses who believe that they saw a woman who could have been Olivia Hope aboard. The head of the IPCA said that it was a difficult inquiry and some actions of police fell short of best practice and had the potential to influence witnesses, but nothing else came of it. In June of 2015, Scott attended his first parole hearing, but he tested positive for drugs and was denied parole. In 2016, he again appeared in front of the board, but was declined. The board made it clear that it does not determine questions of guilt or innocence, nor do they act as some sort of court of appeal from decisions of the criminal justice system, and that on this basis the board would not release Scott until he has had a psychological treatment to address his risk of reoffending, which based on his murder convictions has been assessed as high. The board noted that he still denied committing the murders, had refused to engage with Corrections Department psychologists, and so his risk of reoffending could not be treated. In December of that same year, 2 meetings were facilitated between Scott Watson and Gerald Hope in prison. The meetings were opposed by the Corrections Department and only took place after Scott requested a judicial review of the corrections refusal. Each meeting lasted approximately 3 hours, and during the interview, the pair discussed concerns they had over the investigation and trial, with Hope later saying, "We never got the truth. We haven't gotten the truth yet." Gerald Hope said that when he confronted Scott Watson over the pressing questions he had about his circumstances on January the 1st, Scott went silent, or when he did answer, he found his answers unconvincing. He stated that Scott didn't answer questions or shed light about things that could have cleared his name. However, a journalist who was present during the interview said, "I don't think there was anything that Scott Watson evaded or didn't want to answer. He was very open. Scott couldn't shed light on what he didn't know. He could only add to the things that he did." This journalist added that Hope has had doubts about the case for a long time, and that had not changed. Gerald Hope, after these interviews, stated, "What we got was a conviction, but we never got the truth, and that's what really rips me up." He stated that he wasn't saying that Scott was not guilty, but he wanted to clear up the doubts. Ben's mother and father has always believed that Scott had been guilty of the murders, as the not knowing was too hard for them to bear. Sadly, Ben's father John passed away in 2009 from melanoma. In June of 2020, it was reported that Watson's case would be referred back to the Court of Appeal because of continuing concerns about the reliability of forensic testing used to show the 2 hairs found on a blanket belonged to Olivia. In May 2022, the court also agreed that when the hearing goes ahead, Scott would be allowed to challenge whether the controversial eyewitness evidence related to the blink photo was properly obtained and should have been heard by the jury at his trial. The week-long hearing will take place this year in June of 2024. So that is it for our case for today. This is one of those that I would really like to hear your thoughts on. What do you think? Do you think that Scott is in fact not guilty? Or do you think they are just one too many coincidences and that he is in fact guilty? Definitely one of those head scratches if you ask me. If you have made it this far, thank you so much for watching this video. Please remember to leave a like and subscribe if you have not done so already. Please leave a comment in the comment section down below. I would love to hear your thoughts on this one. Until next time, stay safe out there, take care of yourself, and take care of each other. Bye!